They say small towns are safer, but in Willow Creek, danger wore a smile and polished shoes. My name is Ellie Thompson. I'm 17, and I've lived a life people wouldn't believe. Because the monster who hurt me wore a sheriff's badge and had my last name. Our house looked perfect. A white porch, flower beds, and a freshly painted red front door. My dad was Sheriff John Thompson, respected by everyone. He was the man they called when things went wrong. But at home, he was the reason things were always wrong. The first time he hit me, I was 10. I dropped a plate. He slapped me so hard I saw stars. Then hugged me right after, whispering, "Life is hard. You need to toughen up." That cycle never ended. Hurt, guilt, silence. My mom wasn't much help. She was a shell of the woman she used to be. Her eyes were always down. Her words always quiet. She stopped painting, stopped laughing, stopped resisting. She warned me, "Don't argue, don't cry. It'll be worse if you do." So I didn't. I stayed quiet. I got good grades, kept to myself, and never told anyone the truth. At school, I blended in. No one asked questions, except Miss Jordan. She was my English teacher. Young, gentle, and sharp. She noticed the way I flinched at sudden noises. She noticed the long sleeves in summer. One day she handed me a book, Jane Eyre, and said, "This might help." That night, my dad came home drunk. He shouted about the dirty dishes and threw a glass. It shattered near my feet. He grabbed my arm so tight I thought it would snap. My mom tried to stop him. He pushed her into a chair. Then he stormed out like nothing had happened. My arm ached all night. But I went to school the next morning. When Miss Jordan asked if I was okay, I lied. "I'm fine," I said, but I think she knew. That afternoon, she kept me after class. "Ellie," she said gently, "are you safe at home?" My mouth went dry. No one had ever asked me that. I didn't mean to say it, but it came out anyway. No, she didn't cry. She didn't panic. She just nodded. "Thank you for telling me." I went home terrified. If my dad found out, I didn't know what he'd do. That night, I wrote something on a torn envelope and hid it in my textbook. If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident. I didn't know what would come next. But I had finally said it. And once the truth is spoken, it's hard to silence again. That weekend, something strange happened. My dad was quieter. He didn't yell. He didn't hit. He didn't even drink. He just sat on the porch smoking, staring at nothing. That scared me more than the rage ever did. Calm meant calculation. And when he was quiet, he was planning. I stayed close to my mom. We didn't talk about what happened. We never did. But one night, I saw her reach for her old paintbrushes. Her hands trembled as she touched them, like she wasn't sure they were real. She didn't paint anything. But just the act of holding them felt like a whisper of who she used to be. Monday came, and I dreaded school. I was afraid Miss Jordan would have reported it. Afraid someone would come to our house. Afraid of the consequences of finally being seen. But when I walked into class, she didn't mention anything. She just gave me a quiet nod, slid a folded paper into my notebook, and went on teaching. When I opened it later, it read, "You are not alone. When you're ready, I'll be here." It was the first time I felt something like safety. Not full safety, just the idea of it. The tiniest seed of hope buried under fear. I wasn't ready yet, but I was closer. After I read Miss Jordan's note, "You are not alone. When you're ready, I'll be here," I stared at it for a long time. Those words were soft, but they shook something loose inside me, like a quiet knock at a door I had sealed shut years ago. I folded the note carefully, like it was something sacred, and slid it between the pages of Jane Eyre. I didn't say anything to her the next day or the day after, but just knowing she knew, it changed something. At home, the silence grew thicker. My father still hadn't erupted, but that calmness made every step heavier. It wasn't peace. It was a storm waiting behind closed doors. He didn't say much to me or my mom. He was home less often, which felt like relief, but also made me uneasy. What was he doing? Who was he talking to? Could he tell I had said something? One evening, while he was out, I sat with my mom in the kitchen. She was folding laundry, and I was pretending to do homework. "You've been quieter lately," she said, eyes still on the towel in her hands. I shrugged. "I'm just tired." She paused. "Did you say something to someone?" I froze. My pencil stopped moving. "I'm not mad," she added quickly. I need to know if I should be worried." I looked up. Her face was different. Not fearful, not blank. Just tired. Tired in a way that said she hadn't rested in years. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to scream. But the words got stuck in my throat like thorns. "I don't know," I whispered. She nodded once. Then she said, "If you ever do, just be careful. He has friends, people who owe him favors." It wasn't a warning. It was a truth. Sheriff John Thompson wasn't just a man. He was a symbol in Willow Creek, untouchable. And I had started to crack that image, even if just a little. At school, Miss Jordan didn't pressure me. She'd just glance my way. Sometimes leave little notes in the margins of my assignments. Beautiful phrasing. So much emotion here. Or sometimes just a heart. It didn't seem like much, but to me, it was everything. Then came the night I knew I couldn't wait any longer. It was a Friday. My mom was out buying groceries. My dad came home earlier than expected, drunk. I heard the door slam, the heavy boots across the floor. I had locked my bedroom door, but that didn't matter. He pounded once, then again. "Open the goddamn door, Ellie." I didn't move. "You been talking?" he slurred. "I can smell it, you little rat." I backed away from the door, my whole body shaking. He kept yelling, threats tumbling over one another like waves. And then, silence. I thought maybe he had left, but the next sound was shattering, my door breaking open with a violent crack. I screamed, tried to run, but he caught me by the hair and threw me against the wall. "You think anyone's gonna believe you over me?" he hissed. "I run this damn town." His face was red, veins bulging, spit flying. I tasted blood in my mouth. But I also felt something else. Anger. A hot, electric fury rising from the pit of my stomach. For once, I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I just stared at him, and that seemed to throw him off. He blinked. "What? No tears?" I didn't answer. He raised his hand again, but this time, headlights flashed through the window. My mom's car. He stopped, backed away, stumbled down the stairs like nothing had happened. I barely slept that night. My lip was swollen, my ribs ached, and my mind spun in circles. But I had made a decision. No more hiding. No more hoping he'd change. He wouldn't. He never would. The next Monday, I stayed after class again. Miss Jordan looked up, concerned. "Ellie?" I sat down and pulled a small envelope from my bag. Inside were copies of everything I'd been writing. The dates, the bruises, the threats. "I need help," and I said. My voice cracked, but I didn't cry. "I don't want to go home." She didn't ask why. She didn't tell me to calm down. She just said, "Okay?" What happened next felt like a blur. She walked me to the guidance counselor's office, and from there, they called a social worker. I was taken to a small, quiet room in the back of the school, where I waited for what felt like hours. I kept expecting my dad to show up, to kick the door in like he did at home. But he didn't. Instead, two women came in, one from Child Protective Services, the other from the county sheriff's department. Not from Willow Creek, from outside, neutral, safe. I told them everything. It took over an hour. My voice shook, my hands trembled, but I told them. Every slap, every insult, every silent dinner where fear choked the air. When I finished, they just sat there for a moment. Then, one of them reached across the table and held my hand. "You're very brave," she said. I didn't feel brave. I felt like I was betraying something ancient and sacred, like I was breaking a code that had ruled our family forever. But I also felt lighter. They took photos of my bruises. They asked for the torn notes I'd kept. Then they asked the hardest question. "Do you want to press charge you?" They placed me in a foster home 2 towns over, in a neighborhood with cracked sidewalks and wild sunflowers growing through like chain link fences. It wasn't much, but it was safe, and safety was a feeling I was still learning how to live with. Lisa, my foster guardian, was patient. She never pushed. She just made space. A quiet room, a clean bed, warm food. She left the door open at night. At first, I shut it tight, out of habit. But by the end of the first week, I left it cracked open. A little light spilling in from the hallway was enough to make the darkness feel less cruel. My body began to heal faster than my mind. The bruises faded, but the echoes stayed. I still flinched at loud footsteps. I still expected yelling around corners. But each morning I woke up without fear, felt like a small revolution. Lisa would smile when I came downstairs. She never asked questions, just poured tea and sat with me in silence, as if she knew that silence could also be a kind of comfort when it's not laced with fear. The trial was scheduled for 6 weeks later. In the meantime, I met with lawyers and counselors. I told my story again and again, sometimes in sterile conference rooms, sometimes into a recorder, sometimes to people who looked at me with rehearsed sympathy. But each time I told it, I felt stronger, like the truth was something I could finally carry without it crushing me. My mom was placed in a domestic violence shelter. I didn't see her for the first few weeks, but I got word that she was cooperating. She had turned over photos, medical records, even a journal she used to keep hidden behind our old toaster. I never knew she wrote things down. I guess we were more alike than I thought. When I finally saw her again, it was at a secure meeting arranged by the court. She looked thinner, older, like the years of silence had caught up to her all at once. But there was something new in her face too, a softness. Maybe it was relief. "Hi," I said quietly. She smiled with her eyes more than her mouth. "Hi, baby." We sat across from each other in a room with plastic chairs and fluorescent lights. She reached for my hand, and for a second I hesitated. Then I let her hold it. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for all of it." "I know," I said, and I meant it. We talked for over an hour. She told me she was scared every day, that she wanted to leave years ago but didn't know how, that she stayed because of me, that she felt guilty for not protecting me, but that she was proud of me now. I didn't know how to respond. I just nodded. The wound was still too fresh, but hearing her speak those truths, the same ones we'd both swallowed for years, made me feel less alone in them. Back in Willow Creek, the news had spread like wildfire. The sheriff, beloved, feared, respected, was behind bars. People were shocked, but not everyone was supportive. Some said I was lying, that I was a troubled girl trying to ruin a good man's reputation. Others said my mom brainwashed me, I read online comments from townspeople I used to wave to on my bike rides. She's making it up. She wants attention. That man saved this town more than once. Those words hurt more than I expected. I thought once I told the truth, I'd feel free. But sometimes the truth makes you a target. Miss Jordan warned me that might happen. You challenge the story they've always believed, she said. Not everyone will want to hear yours. But she kept showing up. She testified on my behalf. She brought character witnesses. She drove 2 hours just to bring me the scarf I left in her classroom. She said, "You're not what happened to you, Ellie. You're what you choose to become after." Her words lived in me. As the court date approached, I started having nightmares again. Not about my father, but about the courtroom, the people staring, the cross-examinations, the feeling of being disbelieved. I was more afraid of their eyes than his fists, but Lisa helped me prepare. Every night for a week, she sat across from me and let me rehearse. She'd play the lawyer, asking hard questions. Sometimes she pushed too far, and I'd cry. She'd always stop then, hug me and say, "You can do this scared, and you don't have to be fearless. You just have to show up." The trial lasted 4 days. I testified on the second day. My palms were sweating. My throat felt dry, even though I had a bottle of water in front of me. When they called my name, my legs didn't want to move, but they did. One step at a time, I made it to the witness stand. I looked out at the courtroom and saw him, my father, in an orange jumpsuit, hair messy, face slack. He didn't look powerful anymore, just tired, hollow. He didn't meet my eyes. I told my story under oath, this time in front of strangers and a judge and people who didn't know me. I thought I'd fall apart, but I didn't. I spoke slowly, clearly. I answered their questions. I didn't cry. When I stepped down, Miss Jordan was waiting in the hallway. She didn't say anything. She just opened her arms, and I walked straight into them. On the last day of the trial, the verdict came in. Guilty on multiple counts of domestic violence, child abuse, and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 25 years without the possibility of parole. I sat in that courtroom and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. Not the kind that comes before an explosion, but the kind that comes when a storm has finally passed. After the verdict, some of the townspeople apologized. Quietly, awkwardly. A few women from church sent handwritten notes. One said, "We should have seen it. I'm sorry. It didn't fix anything. But it was something." I saw my mom again a week later. She had started therapy. She looked different, brighter. She wore color again. We walked together in a park, something we hadn't done since I was 8. She told me she wanted to paint again. I told her she should, that I'd come see her first exhibition. That night, I sat by the window in Lisa's house and looked up at the stars. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something bad to happen. I was just breathing. There's still a long way to go. I have trauma that won't vanish overnight. I still wake up sometimes thinking I'm back in that house. But now, when I open my eyes, I see a different ceiling, one with stars painted on it. And I remember, I got out. I spoke up. I was heard. It's been a year, 12 months since the trial, since I stood in that courtroom, shaking but unbroken, since my father was led away in cuffs, while I sat with my hands clenched in my lap, breathing through the storm that finally passed. I still count time by what came after the bruises faded, after the nightmares eased, after the silence became mine to command. not something forced on me. I live with Lisa still, but we've moved to a new house closer to the coast. She says the ocean air helps people heal. I'm not sure if that's true, but I like the sound of waves outside my window. It's softer than yelling, more honest than sirens. I started writing again. Real writing. Not just scraps of paper stuffed in textbooks, but full pages. My story, my voice, my truth. Miss Jordan helped me apply for a Young Writers Scholarship. I got it. Next fall, I'll be attending a creative art school upstate. I used to think I wouldn't make it to 18. Now I'm planning a future. That still feels strange. Some days are harder than others. I have moments where I freeze walking into a room, thinking I'll see him there. I still avoid the scent of his aftershave. I still struggle to fall asleep if the door is closed. But healing isn't about forgetting. It's about reclaiming. I ran into one of my old neighbors from Willow Creek at the grocery store last week. She looked startled to see me, like she'd seen a ghost. She stammered out, "You look strong." I smiled. "I am." She didn't know what to say after that. Maybe there was nothing to say. But for once, I didn't feel the silence for someone else's comfort. My mom lives in a small apartment now. She goes to therapy twice a week. She started painting again. Landscapes mostly. Sunsets and rivers and places she's never been but wants to go. She even sold one of her pieces last month. It's framed in a bookstore downtown. When I visited, the owner told me, "The woman who painted this, she must have seen a lot." I just nodded. "Yeah, she has. We meet every Sunday for coffee. Sometimes we talk about books. Sometimes we talk about nothing at all. But we sit across from each other. Free. That's enough." Not long ago, I was invited back to my old high school to speak to a group of students for a Voices of Survival event. I almost said no. The thought of standing on that stage, of returning to the place where I learned how to disappear, it terrified me. But Lisa said something that stayed with me. Sometimes the places that broke you are the same ones that need to hear how you healed. So I went. The auditorium looked smaller than I remembered. But the fear still felt big. I stepped up to the podium, clutching the speech I'd rewritten 4 times. Then I looked out at the students. Young girls with guarded eyes. Boys slouched in their seats pretending not to care. Teachers watching with quiet hope. And I told them about the girl who wore long sleeves in July, who answered every question with "I'm fine," who thought her voice didn't matter. I told them that silence isn't peace, that fear disguised as loyalty is not love, that no one deserves to live in a war zone and call it home. And I told them this: you are not broken. What happened to you is not who you are, and you never ever have to earn the right to be safe. When I finished, there was a pause, just a breath, and then applause. Not thunderous, but enough. Afterward, a girl with shaking hands came up to me. She didn't say anything at first, just hugged me, tight. That was the moment I knew. I didn't just survive. I had created space for someone else to begin. Because survival isn't just getting out. It's what you do once you're free. It's learning how to trust again, to breathe deeply, to laugh loudly, to sleep with the door cracked open, and one day, maybe, wide. This story started with silence, with bruises hidden beneath sweaters and a name that made people look away. But it ends here, with a voice, with a girl who doesn't whisper anymore. My name is Ellie Thompson, and I am not afraid to be heard.